Right, good people, if you've been watching the news, if you've been looking around your community, no doubt you've noticed different changes happening, especially when the rains have been pounding our land. Some people have had flood waters come right into their homes and disrupt their very existence. Some of us have seen important and crucial infrastructure being swept away, dismissed and destroyed in mere seconds. Some of us have seen your shops, your schools, your important key landmarks just disappear all in a matter of moments. And it's all got to do with, they say, the fury of nature. Well, the fury of nature is there on one hand, and we should be able to expect that. But on the other hand, we should be able to be prepared for this. For floods are not something new. Rains are not anything new. And that's why we have people like my guest, engineers, people who study to solve problems like this. And tonight we have a gentleman by the name of Engineer Shama Kiteme. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
And he's here to help us gain some understanding, some insight into what's going on. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
I mean, your CV is long, your bio is quite large, so I think the less said, the better.
All right.
Because we'll keep Kenyans here for 25 minutes just talking about what you can do.
Well, I don't think so, but thanks for that compliment.
The pleasure is ours. Karibu sana. Right off the bat, what do you see when you watch the news, especially lately? The rains that we've had almost a week ago. People are still feeling the impacts right now. What do you see from an engineer's perspective, from a Kenyan's perspective? What does that tell you about the society we live in and the structures that we have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Of course, quite saddening to see the kind of pictures that we see every time this happens. It tells you there's a failure somewhere. It's a failure in planning. It's a failure of thinking ahead of our infrastructure so that it can take up what nature brings our way. Because really, we are rational beings and we are supposed to think ahead so that we are not victims or caught unawares by instances where the fury of nature comes and then we are being caught up by floods and all that. We have things we can do with proper planning, with laying out infrastructure that can take in the kind of overflow and the storm that we get, and there's a way of containing it and channeling it and evacuating it in a proper manner that it doesn't threaten our very existence. Because we're seeing instances of even death by droning and destruction of property and all that. So it's a clear disaster that emanates from a failure to plan and think ahead.
Right. So walk us through the steps that you've mentioned. So picture this. We have rains. What should we be expecting? What should we be anticipating when we get a notification from the Met department that, hey, it's going to rain and it's going to be heavy? What should we expect to see?
Now, first things first, the way you want to think about this is to imagine that if there was nothing constructed in Nairobi or whichever other urban setting, the ground would have capacity to absorb the rains when they come and percolate into the ground. And then the water, once percolates into the ground, it forms part of what we call groundwater. And we talk about groundwater level and stuff like that. We talk about recharging the aquifers, which we later can extract through boreholes and get underground water. Now, when you have a situation whereby the ground is covered or paved by either tarmac, by cabro, by roof, or any slab, so that you replace the ground that should have been available to absorb the rainwater. What you have done, you have created what we call runoff. Now, runoff is what now becomes the free water that is running, and it is what we are now meeting as floods. Now, in the process of development, you want to think about that moment you have replaced the ground that should have absorbed water. You now plan for the runoff, which is resorting, because the rainwater will hit the surface, it will run off, it will not be able to be absorbed into the ground. Now plan for that runoff. There are several ways of doing that. You could create ground recharge wells, you can do that. You could create channels and open channels stormwater drainage systems and infrastructure, you could create that so that then you evacuate the runoff. Now, when you do not evacuate the runoff, that runoff is going to become a menace because water must find its way out.
Has to find a way.
Where it finds its way and then it meets you, it will probably carry your property, it will soak your property. Somehow it must find its way out. And so that is the scenario we are in. We have paved the ground surface and we have not provided a way out for water to be evacuated in a safe manner. Yeah.
All right. Now, they say when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. But some people would also observe and say it's not possible to stop everybody from constructing. It's not possible to stop what we're doing. I mean, we can't stand in the way of progress. Just like water, progress is unstoppable. However, there's things we can do. I mean, the milk has been spilled, but there's things we can do to remedy the situation or salvage it somewhat. What are your thoughts on that? What can we do? What should we do?
Now, the first things first, we must acknowledge there's a problem. There's a big problem because we have created paved services. And when you have created paved services, we have created conditions relevant for the runoff that then collects and accumulates and becomes a lot of water. And you're seeing it run off now. When we acknowledge that, then we invest on the storm evacuation infrastructure. Storm sewers, we create them because we have seen roads or paved services created and people are not mindful about the evacuation for the stormwater. We need to think about when we have done a road, side drains, we should think about how to evacuate water through the side drains. We want to think about when you do a building, the down pipes, and how do you deposit the water from the roof? How do you deposit it? We have rainwater harvesting and all that. We must be mindful about that. We have seen situations and instances, especially in Makueni County. We have seen roads done and then the side drains, the water that you collect, because you have to evacuate water from the pavement. When you collect the water in the side drain, that water is used it's collected, then we become more creative. We must create a way of constructively using the runoff. Because this is the contradiction. We have rain in one season and we have people dying of storm and floods.
Right.
Soon after that,
a few weeks later, a few months later,
we have a dry spell.
Exactly.
And people are dying of drought. It's a contradiction of sorts.
It is.
So we have a way in which we can then collect this massive water that once comes and it's a problem and a menace to us and store it. We can think about water pans, we can think about dams and stuff like that. We invest in infrastructure where we can, gainfully harness this runoff that becomes a menace to us in form of floods and all that. And we are creative, we are rational. We just need to become mindful of that, and part of what I would consider sustainable development, because then this water that is disappearing, we can store it, we can harness it, and 80% of this country is arid and semi-arid lands, which tells you the bigger portion of the year it's a dry spell.
It's dry.
Would you then think of collecting this water enough to be able to use it for the dry part of the year?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, these are brilliant ideas. Now, I'm thinking of, for example, the communities in Soweto, in the city of Nairobi, the people in Kachaliba, the people in all the other parts of the country where we're experiencing flooding, in Tana River, in Makueni, along the coastal strip, in Western Kenya, in Murang'a, in all those different places. Are there things that you would suggest from an engineer's perspective that communities can do for themselves? I mean, a lot of what you're saying is heavy infrastructure, lots of policy, lots of big plans, zoning, construction kind of things, big, large-scale things. What can people do? For example, the folks down at Soweto. I mean, all they have to deal with is, soaked mattresses, sofas entirely destroyed. And these guys are saying they've grown up in those communities. This is all they know. Obviously, low-income communities, you don't necessarily expect them to just up and leave and find, holiday homes to weather out the storm. What can people do? What can community organizations do? What can things like churches, youth groups, women groups, what can they do to be able to help themselves, even as they wait for the government to kind of roll around to sorting some of these things?
One of the things that you can do, especially as a community, and if where you are there is a little bit of infrastructure, however rudimentary it is, some of the problems we have is that the infrastructure that is there is actually clogged, it is blocked and all that. So communities can come together and band together and help clear the existing infrastructure if it is there now. In situation that it is not there, we should be able to create ways of, of drains. They can be earthen drains. Sometimes they don't have to be lined. And create the drains to make sure that when it comes...
So like ditches, something, a group of boys can come and dig ditches and whatnot?
Absolutely. When it rains, the water has a way out. That is another way of doing it. Now, we have a bigger problem of urban planning where we are not thinking about development in an integrated manner, which means I will not just build somewhere. I'll think about the storm infrastructure, I'll think about the sewer infrastructure, I'll think about water supply, I'll think about power and all that. That's a bigger problem, and this city is in a mess because of that reason.
The planning.
However, in an urban setting, communities can, in a small way, participate in a way of making sure that when it rains, the water has its way out of their compounds and all that. And you can even put a berm around your house and you can create drains and all that. Now, I think that will be different, the way we will respond in an urban setting compared to a rural setting.
In the rural setting.
Because in the rural setting, the biggest thing that we can do is if we can create ditches, we can create, in a very small scale, ponds. And I've seen some counties avail earth movers and excavators, whereby people can hire for around 2 hours, 3 hours or something like that, and they excavate. Excavate, you just remove soil and you create a depression where that water can
trap
collect.
The water.
As many as you can do that, then what you are creating is that you're creating various chambers for water to collect, and it is useful for you. This water that is running off and running away into the ocean, you will still need it. Now, in a more organized manner, we could have concepts and think about water pans all over this country. We can have a mantra of a water pan in a village. Water pan for every constellation of 10 houses or instance or something like that. They have
something, yes.
And we think about creating a water pan, and we collecting that water for those families. They can feed their cattle. They can use it for the cattle to take care of that. They can use it for irrigation and all that. So that then becomes a targeted way of investing that way to have water harvesting all over the country. That water can be used for irrigation, can be used for cattle and stuff like that. And I believe then when we do that, we are solving several problems. Number one, the water problem. And then when you make it available, you can do irrigation for food, vegetables and stuff like that. Then you are solving food problem. And number three, when you invest properly in containing the water, you solve another problem of controlling floods. As engineers, we design dams for several purposes: hydroelectric power, irrigation and stuff like that, but also for flood control. We have seen Tana River always year in, year and out.
Right, it breaks
having
banks and huge
banks and stuff like that. We are able to design dams for flood control. And that is possible. However, I appreciate at that high level now, it's significant investment. But as engineers, we are up to this task. We are leading conversations on this kind of investments. And measures to be able to make sure that we harness forces of nature for the betterment of humanity. And this is sustainable development. Remember, where we have been placed, we can thrive there. It's a question of what we can do to thrive.
Excellent. I love that. And perhaps I'll give you a challenge. You and your brothers and sisters in engineering could perhaps reach out to, we have a culture of CSR. Our corporate Kenya loves to go out and do things for the sake of different communities and different causes. Perhaps you could design things for them to actually back systems that can help communities in a much more impactful way, because they have access to funds, and community is indeed in need of such investments.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. Now, listen, this is a huge conversation, and indeed it cannot be solved in just one sitting. But I'd like to believe we've left something in the hearts and minds of our people.
Yeah.
But speaking of hearts and minds, I would like to give you an opportunity to speak to the people who are watching you. Speak to whoever you wish to speak to, the opinion leaders, the thought leaders, the common humanity on the ground, professionals such as yourself. If there could be a message that you'd like to pass, what would that be? And as you think about that, good people, this is a subject that all of you know and are affected by. And we'd like to urge you, when we have interviews like this, send in your questions so that we can be able to task our experts to give us tips and insights, just like the show suggests, that we can be able to apply in our communities. We'd like to ask you to share this program on YouTube, on Facebook, and all the other social media platforms. Share it around, so the wisdom that our engineers and our guests who come on this program is able to spread. Sir, this is your camera. Speak to Kenyans from your heart or from your mind.
Thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to have this conversation. I'll begin by telling you I'm already involved in my community, in the village, to address this kind of a problem, dealing with a water pan, and we should be able to, get it up and running to be able to harvest rainwater for our communities. And this applies to every village, every hamlet, every small town in this country. It is possible for us to think about harvesting rainwater through water pans in a very small way. I am appealing to the county governments. You are able to provide earth movers, you are able to provide excavators, and apply this for small communities wherever they are. Excavate those water pans, create opportunity for them to harvest the water, and that water will be available for their livestock. It is available for irrigation, and it's a very small and a big way that we can go into addressing several issues, including food security and all that. And I believe us as professionals, we are available. IEK, for instance, we have branches all over the country, and we have been involved in CSR activities to provide water in communities as far flung areas as Marsabit, Isiolo, and we are present to offer guidance to our county governments, to our villages, to everyone involved in development. And so we want to encourage all of us to be creative, to be able to harness all the opportunities that we have. And as professionals, especially speaking from IEK, engineers are available to give our expertise in this regard, so that then we are able to collectively move ourselves towards development, because we have opportunities. It is ridiculous that the rain that comes and beats us through floods, it then goes and in a dry spell. I do believe that we should be able to harness this so that we can use the water in that part of the year where we do not have rain. Thank you very much.
All right. I believe that's a very engineering way of saying, if life serves you lemons, you better make some lemonade. Good people, that's been our time tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to bring you the news as well as a discussion with people such as our guest tonight. I thank you for choosing us to inform you. My name is Victor Moyakane. I wish you a good night full of God's blessings. Until then.
Na safari hii katika Mfahamu Kiongozi tutakuletea viongozi aina mbalimbali.
Nilikuwa na Nisani kama